to In the News for November 17, 2023. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
This is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hi, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. We want to say thank you once again to our fantastic sponsor, Lit Software, who are the makers and developers of TrialPad, the TrialPad app for the iPad, the TranscriptPad app. We'll talk a little bit more about them a little bit later. But I was thrilled to hear, Jeff, that the Bitterant is back, baby. I know we've talked about this a couple of times, but you had a post this past week on the fact that you can now actually use CR2032 batteries with Bitterant coatings in your Apple AirTags. Now,
yeah, which is good because those are the ones.
World.
Yeah, those are the ones that you should have. I think only Duracell makes them, if I'm correct. Maybe some other manufacturers do. It might just be Duracell. But those make so much sense because although, my kids are teenagers now, Brett, but I remember, and I'm sure you do too, when kids are little, they put everything in their mouth. And something like one of these, batteries that almost looks like a little candy or something, I can totally see them picking it up and trying to swallow it, which is very dangerous.
Right,
so it exactly just like a wafer. So it makes perfect sense that you would want to put something in here that when you stick it in your mouth, it makes you want to instantly, say blech and take it out of your mouth. But as I reported last year, when I bought some of these and tried to use them in an AirTag, it didn't work for me. And at the time I was traveling abroad and it was really pain. So I was thrilled to discover that Apple and the batteries companies, Duracell, others maybe, have gotten their act together. And so now you can have the best of all worlds. You can have the Bitterant coating and it works with the AirTags. So the next time that I go buy some, this is exactly what I'm going to buy.
Yeah, I liked how you have the little picture here because up in the upper right corner, it says compatible with AirTag. Like that wasn't there before on those. My absolute favorite part of this is the little logo that they put on these battery packs now. It's this little baby with X's for eyes and the tongue sticking out. Called Bitter Taste. I'm like, hey, if you don't know what that means, then you might need to.
If there's ever a picture tells 1,000 words, that's a picture that tells 1,000 words. Everything you need to know
Absolutely.
About it right there.
How about some RCS? Some really cool software. At least that's the way I put it. I think this actually stands for what? Rich Communication Services. You reported on this. I saw a headline, and I got to admit, I wasn't too sure what was going on here, probably because I'm a little too Apple-centric, because it sounds like the RCS support that Apple is offering now is going to help us be a little bit more friendly in our communications with our Android-using brethren.
Sure. So, way back when we had text messaging, right? I remember back during Hurricane Katrina. So that's 2005. The cell phone network wasn't working in New Orleans because, of all the disaster. And it was the first time that me and a lot of my friends and family started to use text messages. And that was back in the days when, you didn't have a keyboard. So like to make the letter P, you would have to press the number 222 and then 33, all that sort of stuff. So text messaging has come a long way. But years and years ago, Apple realized that the original SMS text messaging was just too simplistic. And so Apple developed its own iMessage to have so many more features. You could have longer messages, you could have rich text, you can have, the little thumbs up features, all the different things they've added on top of it. And it works great when iPhones are talking to iPhones or other Apple products, but you don't have the features when you talk to people using Android. And so over the years, Google has tried various efforts to have its own system that is similar to iMessage. And the most recent one is RCS, which is technically a standard, but since, really the only alternative to iMessage and the iPhone is Android, it's a standard, but it's also just sort of like the Google system. And so Google for months now, for years, has been saying, let's get, Apple needs to adopt the standard and Apple needs to do the same thing as everybody else in the world, which is really just them. And they even ran a big campaign on it back in September, like ads, like, Apple, why won't you get on board? And, Apple has publicly said in the past, we're fine with our current system. So it was when I saw the news this week, I was very surprised. I was like, wow. Now, you can argue, are they doing it because maybe European regulators are pushing Apple to have more standards compliance, or is Apple doing it out of the goodness of their heart? But the bottom line is, it's going to take them a year to implement this, and we don't know the details, but the end result is going to be, you're not going to get all the iMessage features, but you'll get more. I mean, for example, if you've ever tried to send like a big movie or a big picture to someone with Android using text messaging, and it's a pain in the butt, that should be fixed. Now, currently, RCS is not encrypted. So if you're worried about the privacy of your messages, as soon as you send it to someone on RCS, you lose all the encryption, where you keep that if you communicate within the Apple network. But we'll see how this all gets worked out. Now, a lot of people have said, oh, does this mean that Android people will no longer be green bubbles? And the answer to that is no. That's going to stay exactly the same. So even though they will have a better system with RCS, they will continue to be green bubbles. And, you can argue whether that's fair or unfair. But I mean, it's just Apple's way of indicating that when you're communicating with the blue bubble person, you have encryption, you have all the advantages of iMessage. And if you're not, whether it's traditional SMS or this new RCS next year, Apple's going to indicate that with the green bubbles. So, I mean, it's good upside for consumers, and I'm glad that Apple's doing it. Although, Apple doesn't always like to play in the open world. They're often happy just to live in their own little sandbox.
Sure. And I mean, in addition to the security aspects or the security benefits of using iMessages, obviously that's the first thing people should be thinking of. But it also allows me to do like tapbacks, which I can't do when I'm, do easily when I have an Android person that's in the mix of a conversation, for example. And again, I know that's a little less important maybe than the security aspects, but it's just I'm used to doing the tapbacks, a little thumbs up or something like that. And when there's somebody that's an Android, it doesn't work that way.
We don't know for sure how it's going to be supported. Hopefully tapbacks will work just fine next year, but it wouldn't be surprised if like maybe Memoji won't work. We'll have to see. There's going to be some features that will, some features that won't. Stickers, for example, that's a big thing. Are stickers going to work? But we'll have to see how it gets implemented. But regardless, the bottom line is we're going to have more features implemented than we have now. That's for sure. It's not going to be everything, I'm sure, but it's going to be more than we have now. So, group texting, I know that's an issue. Some people like to have a group text, and that's what I'm saying. If there's one person that has Android, they often just don't even include them in the group because it messes up all the features. So it would be nice if you wouldn't have to, exclude.
If you would have to do that. I really think now that I understand it a little better, and you're always so good to explain it, that this has got to be a good thing. I mean, I feel like we've gone enough years now with iMessages, and it's so kind of baked into my general level of life and whatever I do and the people that I communicate with. I really just hope that by this time Apple will be able to roll this out correctly. I like a couple of things here that Chance Miller in this article that you linked to. This is not Apple opening up iMessages to other platforms, which I think that would kind of hurt that potential security there. Instead, he says it's the company adopting RCS separately from iMessage, which I think is great. And then last year, like at the very bottom, I like how he says, we have come a very long way since Tim Cook's rebuttal of RCS back in 2022, which at the time Cook said Apple hadn't heard from many users about RCS. In other words, Tim Cook was like, it's not a big deal. Nobody's asking about it. So in fact, I think he said, buy your mom an iPhone was the answer.
The question Tim Cook had. The question back last year was somebody said, but my mom has an Android phone and I can't communicate fully. And his answer was, well, just buy your mom an iPhone if you love her. So I added the if you love her part at the end, but I think it was implied.
Okay, good. So that was good. All right, we'll keep watching that. Well, another story that you linked to that involves Apple and Google, which a little bit more of an interesting aspect here. How much does Google pay Apple every year, or part of their revenue every year from the Google search results? Is that right? Is that an accurate way that people do on the iPhone? Probably an answer that wasn't supposed to be known, but it kind of slipped out and a lot of people picked up on it.
Yeah. Every web browser out there has a search feature. And for, decades now, Google would pay money if they were the default search feature. And so way back, 20 years ago, Apple, when it had its Safari web browser only on the Mac, it negotiated with Google that, if Google would be the default, which of course made sense because Google was the best search engine, but a certain percentage of sales that Google made by showing ads when you run a search that you initiate from the Safari search bar, Apple would get those sales. And so that, in the very beginning days, that was nothing. But then as the Safari web browser came to the iPhone and the iPhone became so dominant, suddenly the biggest way that Google could get search and thus can get revenue from ads and search on the iPhone was because of this deal that they had in Apple. And we've always known that Google pays Apple a lot of money for it, and Google gets, I'm sure, a lot of value out of it, but Apple does too. But as you said, Brett, it was during the trial this week that a witness revealed on the stand, and he wasn't supposed to say it, but sometimes in trials, people just say things out loud, and then they are in the public record. And there was a Bloomberg reporter there sitting watching it that 36%. And this number is interesting. Wow. The percentage is interesting because it's big, over a third, but the dollars are interesting too, because it has been estimated, and Apple's revealed some of this, I think, in the past, but I want to say that it's something like 18 or so billion with a B, billion dollars that Apple is getting from Google. And, so think about that for a second. Yeah. Apple likes to talk about how we are the company that, care about your privacy, right? They have big ads that they run about privacy. Sure. And, we're not trying to sell you as a product. We are selling you an iPhone. It's other companies like Google that are trying to make money off of the searches that you do. But the reality is Apple's making very good money off of the searches that you do. If they're making around $18 billion a year, a couple of years ago, Apple was making about $100 billion in profit every year. I think now it's closer to like 160. But, let's just say over 10% of Apple's profit, because I'm sure this is all profit, over 10% of Apple's profit is coming from people, running searches and Google, selling those ads. And so, if you think about, I can say I'm a lawyer, but if 10% of my profit comes from selling popcorn, well, I'm sort of a popcorn person too. And so likewise, Apple, they may sell hardware and services of their own, but they also are in the search business. So that's one interesting thing. And then, of course, if 36% is Apple, the other 60% is Google. And so that's why I think it's interesting. We were just talking about the, Google versus Apple when it comes to text messaging and RCS and all that sort of stuff. Google has Android and Apple has iPhone, but Google is making money off of every iPhone because of these ads. There was a time, Brett, I'm sure you're going to remember the statistic, but, years and years and years ago, Microsoft used to say that they actually made more money off of every Mac user than they did every PC user, because PC users would buy a Windows computer that has Microsoft Office built in, so there wouldn't be as much profit. But Apple users would often go out and purchase Microsoft Office. And so just on a per user basis, Microsoft would boast, if someone's going to be a Mac user, they're actually going to pay us more than if they were a Windows user, which is always a funny statistic. And now we have something similar here, that people that are purchasing iPhones are actually paying quite a bit of, not directly, but, Google is making money off of you, even if you're an iPhone person. And so, it just shows that all these companies are all very interrelated. There's these relationships, and they may be competitors, but they also are each making money off of each other and have a vested interest in the other one continuing to do what they do. It's really interesting.
I contribute a good amount of this every day. Because that Google is my default search engine in Safari. And I remember not too long ago, that I think we only had a couple of options in the search engine default setting. And you go to your settings in your iPhone, you go to Safari, you can dictate which search engine you want to be the default. And I believe before, maybe it was Google and maybe Yahoo, maybe Bing, I don't remember, but it seemed like not too long ago, Jeff, that DuckDuckGo was now an option, and it is an option in there now. You can have Google, Yahoo, Bing, DuckDuckGo, and then Ecosia. I'm not even familiar with that. I'm not familiar with that one either. That's one that I have in here as well. I just remember it was a big deal when DuckDuckGo was going to be like, hey, that's one that if you don't want any ads, you don't want to participate in this, you don't want to, now you would know, you don't want to give any percentage of your search results to Apple or Google, you could do that. But I've tried the others, Jeff, and I keep coming back to the Google basic search engine. Yeah, I feel like I get what I am typically looking for, and there's a reason why people are going back there. But the point is, people can go and tell your Safari browser on your iPad and your iPhone to do a different default search engine. But I'm assuming the default is when you pull it out of the box, it's still going to be Google.
Yeah. I'll share before we leave this topic, Brett. I heard something funny this morning. I was listening to a podcast when I was coming into work called Dithering that has a guy named John Gruber on it from Daring Fireball. And John, you know how sometimes, Brett, when you'll ask Siri, a question, and instead of giving you an answer, it'll say, you go search the answer on, if you want more, search for
Here's
it.
Here's what I found on the web.
Here's what I found on the web. John's joke was maybe Apple's doing that because they can make a little revenue. You can go search for it on the web, which I'm sure is just a joke. But it is sort of funny that maybe Siri has a vested interest in getting you to run that Google search so that Apple can make its 36%. Who knows?
I like the way John thinks. That's good stuff. Well, good news if you have ever relied on the emergency satellite coverage with your iPhone 14, it's going to be extended. One of my favorite things that we do now, Jeff, is when we have a Where You At segment. I don't think we have one this week, folks. I'm sorry, but I love doing this. And a couple of times we reported on how incredibly helpful and amazingly helpful that this satellite emergency system has been to save folks, really, that have been stranded either through their own fault or no fault of their own or whatever the case may be. The point is that even when there's not cellular access, that they could actually, some of it is like when the satellite is just right at the right position and then they can connect with that satellite and it's just enough of a text message to get to the emergency personnel to let them know where this poor person is. I suspected, just like Dan talks about in this story that you linked to, that I don't know how Apple can stop this as a free service almost, Jeff. I mean, maybe you got a different take on it, but it was only for a year. You bought an iPhone 14, right? And it was for a year. But now they have officially said, we're going to extend it for another year. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's still the rule that if you buy a new iPhone, you get it for a year. But if you've already used up your first year, you're going to get another year too. And so we'll see what happens a year from now. On the one hand, I see what you're saying, Brett, because what you're saying is, why would Apple want to start saying, if you don't want to die, you have to pay us money? And I can understand you. On the other hand, Brett, there are companies like Garmin that specifically sell satellite, radios and security, specifically, nobody says that Garmin should give its things away for free because it can be life-saving. People know that they need to pay for that. And so I don't know what Apple's going to do. My personal hope is that if Apple does monetize this, it will say, look, it's going to be included if you subscribe to X, any of these sorts of services. Yeah. If you buy, so maybe there'll be a way that it'll be a sort of a built-in price. But the thing is, this is one of those things. It's like buying insurance. You hope you never need it, but if you ever do, oh my goodness, are you glad that you have it? I didn't link to it, but there was an article this week that I think Chance Miller wrote, 9 to 5 Mac, and the question that he answered in the article was, should you buy an Apple Watch that has cellular on it? And he was talking about the advantages. Yeah. And one of the big advantages of cellular is if you ever find yourself in a situation where all you have with you is your watch and something horrible happens, whether you fall and it's crash detection like that, or if you're in an emergency, you need to call, you can always do it. And people that were commenting on his post were saying, yeah, it's another, $100 or $200, whatever it is a year to pay for it. But the security that you get is so worth it. And so, how much is it worth paying on security? I guess we all have to answer those questions every day when we buy things. And I personally don't consider myself a person that goes off the grid very often. So I don't know that satellite SIOS is going to help me. It's more likely to help you, Brett, because you sometimes go hiking in places that are off the grid. But but I do like that it's there just in case, just in case I'm driving in the middle of the nowhere or something like that, going to a deposition somewhere or going to go interview a witness in the middle of a state and I don't know where I am. I'd like that I have that feature. And so I probably would pay something for it, but I'm glad I don't have to think about it now because Apple's just continuing not to charge for it.
Well, quickly on the watch thing, I have come full circle to that. Like, to me right now, if I get an Apple Watch, I will probably have a cellular plan with it. Even though this past year is with this Apple Watch Ultra is the first time that I've done that. But going back to the phone thing, here's the difference that I see, Jeff. If Garmin has always charged for it. And so if I knew that I wanted a Garmin quality, device, then I would have gone and purchased it. The thing is, Apple should have charged for this from the beginning, I guess is what I would say. Because now anybody that got an iPhone 14 back a year ago had this option in there, right? And so even if you were not aware of it, at least it was there, right? So that it would have it. But it's like now I feel like how can Apple go back and start charging for this? Because there's going to be a good amount of people that don't realize that they need to actually pay for this or sign up. As much marketing as that Apple may do, there's still going to be some people that won't sign up for it. They're going to get caught, and they could have been saved if they had this on there. It's like, that's going to be blood on Apple's hands at that point. Anyway, that's my take on it. It's like, I am thrilled that they're doing it. Don't let me take anything away from Apple. The fact that they are doing another year. Even Dan down here says this, that he suspected they were going to do this. But as he says,
too.
Definitely doesn't want to. Apple doesn't want to be in a position of having a customer unable to use the service because they didn't pony up for an additional monthly cost. And I kind of say so. All that to say, I mean, again, I know how incredibly expensive satellite connections are. I think Apple has rolled this out extremely well with the little tiny, pieces and bits of text communication that can happen there. But I'm like, oh my goodness, just wrap that into another bonus that you can get from an Apple iPhone. Like I just feel like it could be bad if they start charging. But
here's my prediction, Brett. This is what I mean, consistent with what you're saying. I think that Apple's now been testing this for a year. They're going to test it for another year. They're going to know how much it actually costs them to run the service and what the cost is run it. There's talk that Apple is getting even more satellites online and maybe take a few years, but I think that at some point in the future Apple's going to sell a service, and the service is going to be, you can use our satellites for just regular text messages. Maybe it'll go back to the days of saying, like, because it's still expensive to send it via satellite, it might be like you get, 10 texts a month or 100 texts a month for a certain price. And my guess is what Apple's going to say, look, we have our free package, which is, emergency services, and you get one text a month or something just to sort of come onto the service. And then they'll have tiers, and through the cost of the entire package, it'll monetize the whole thing and pay for it. That's my prediction. But I think that technology is still a few years away, but I do think that we're going to get there one day.
Yeah. Good stuff. You mentioned John Gruber. I would like to be John Gruber. I would have liked to have been John Gruber this past week, because he got a special invite to go to New York. I think he's out of Philadelphia. He got to go to New York and use his iPhone 15 Pro to record spatial video, and then, or I guess photos, right? And then he got to see it on a Vision Pro in a very, elaborate, Apple constructed, specialized, focused environment, of course. But I was mesmerized a little bit by reading this story. And then I think you also linked to some other folks. Joanna Stern did this, and other folks from CNET and Wall Street Journal. That's Joanna as well. Interesting stuff here. Just to kind of, I think Apple is really doing a very good job of kind of just continuing to whet our appetites for what they haven't released until who knows when, January, February of next year, with the Vision Pro.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the Vision Pro. When Apple first debuted it and they showed off the ability to have these spatial video, and initially Apple said you could record it with the Vision Pro. And we all joked about that, because it's like, who wants to walk around recording video with this thing on your face? But what we're all very used to doing is just holding up our iPhone and recording video that way. And so one of the things that Apple did with the newest iPhone 15 Pro, like you and I have, is they moved around these cameras in the back. So right now, this camera that I'm pointing to, which is all the way in the corner, this is the 0.5. This is the ultra 5 one, the ultra wide one. And then the one that's right next to it here is the regular camera that you use for your normal shots. And then the one down here is the telephoto. And so these two that are right next to each other, if you're holding up your phone left and right, what Apple's now doing is turning that into, one is your left eye and one is your right eye, to take these 3D spatial videos. And now those two cameras on the back of your iPhone are pretty close to each other. Certainly much closer than your eyes are. But according to the people that tested this last week with Apple, they've said it actually works pretty well, that if you're recording video with your iPhone, just using, those are only about an inch apart, but recording some video with one and some with the other, and then you later look at it with the Vision Pro, it does look It's just like you were something like 3D or 3D, like in a real life sense of 3D, not in a special effects 3D, but it feels more like you're actual there. It's not unlike the difference between listening to music in mono, which can sound fine, but then you listen to it in stereo and suddenly it feels all the more enveloping because it's different things on different sides. And so I love that you'll be able to use an iPhone to capture memories that you can later recreate using the Vision Pro. And Apple only allowed a few reviewers to see it last week. I think you named most of them, but
Right.
all of them were incredibly enthusiastic about the results, saying that it really, really seems, fantastic. So, I mean, as I joked today, I don't know when 17.2 is going to come out. I presume it's going to come out in the next few weeks, but certainly by the holidays this year, Christmas for me, I'm going to definitely record some video using this because, although I won't be able to appreciate it now, at some point in the future, I'm sure I'll have a Vision Pro, and it'll be cool to appreciate, the memories that I'm recording now in the future. There's currently some limitations, Brett, like it doesn't have 4K. It can only do 1080p, and that's just because of the quality of the ultra wide camera. Apple might fix that next year. Maybe next year's iPhone 16 will be able to record 4K for spatial video as opposed to this year's. But it still looks like it's a pretty compelling thing. So I think it's really cool. And the last thing I'll say is whenever we hear these little stories about the Vision Pro, and maybe there's some bias because the people that are invited to use it are just so excited that they had the opportunity that maybe they're more effervescent than they should be. But these are reporters that are supposed to be, somewhat, objective, and they have all come away saying
see a lot of
this
stuff.
Is exactly, they see so much stuff for it, and they're like, this is really, really cool. It makes me very excited that Apple might actually have something really interesting on its hands. We're going to all know next year when it's out, but for now, this could be really cool. I'm really looking forward to the Vision Pro.
Well, apparently you and John Gruber will be recording spatial video on your phones this year, this holiday season. He mentioned that in this piece that you linked to. And it just, when I read that, and I figured you would be saying kind of the same thing, I am so glad now. We talked about this when we were getting our iPhone 15s, that typically we got 256 gig, or that's what I typically got, right? Was that the size of my drive? Because I knew that I would be taking photos, and that was plenty. I would watch the storage, and I think Apple has done a great job recently with the Photos app, so that only the most recent photos maybe are actually on your hard drive, on the iPhone or the iPad. The others are still accessible, but in some cases you may have to download them. They've done a very good job, I think, of balancing that out. But both of us, I believe, upgraded to 512 gigs on our iPhones this year. I followed your lead on that simply because I'm like, there's better. I didn't even think about the Vision Pro, the spatial video. I just thought I want to do more 4K. I want to do better pictures because I know there's going to be better cameras. And so I upgraded. So I'm glad that I did now for this from that aspect. And then the other thing quickly that you mentioned on here, and people were showing some pictures, I had no idea that Apple changed the hardware orientation of the 3 cameras on the back.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
I did not know that. And I don't think I've ever even seen that. And when I was reading through this story, I was just gobsmacked at this. I was like, really? Because in my mind, I know it probably wasn't that big of an engineering feat, to change these around. But the fact that they did it tells me already that Apple is really investing a lot of time and resources into setting up for the spatial video. In other words, that gets me even a little bit more excited about the Vision Pro, whereas I thought maybe next year would just be Apple's kind of like, let's just, shoot a flare up in the sky and see, how many people are going to look at it. But if they've done this from like a precursor almost, because what other reason would they be doing it? That tells me that they're really putting in a little bit more into Vision Pro than I kind of originally thought that they were going to.
Yeah. It's cool. It's really cool.
Well, you mentioned 17.2, since we are currently on 17.1, and I thought this was an excellent article that you linked to from Gadget Hacks. 43 cool new features coming to your iPhone in 17.2. Some of these I know we've talked about before, but others I was like, hey, that's going to be really cool. The Journal app, for example, we've talked about, and some of the additional Memoji components on there, but there's some really good art. Like, I'm even more excited about 17.2 now.
Yeah, it's going to have a lot. And, some of these features are not much more than just like one additional setting in an app.
Sure.
So the number 43 it might not feel like 43 different features, but they are different things and they are improvements here and there. You've got the big ones like the Journal app, which is a brand new app. And if you're interested in journaling and tracking your daily activities, it's going to be exciting. Right. And then other ones are less important, like some of them that you're flipping by right here. But it just shows you that there's going to be a lot in this update. And so I'm really I'm looking forward to it.
I didn't realize there was going to be as many like small slight changes like you're talking about in the music app, in the App Store app, in the TV app. Like, and to me, it sort of that just makes sense. And I probably wouldn't even, realize it other than just the next time that I opened it, it was like, hey, that's kind of neat. The button's in a different place. But I just like how he lays that out here in the Gadget Hacks site. And it's like, oh, okay. Like you said, each one of these may not justify its own little listing here to get to 43. But there's some really cool, I think, minor tweak / upgrades in here that they're gonna be helpful on that. And like you said, you think it's gonna be in maybe the next week or two, right? For 17.2.
Well, next week's Thanksgiving. I don't think it's going to come out next week.
Okay,
but
good point.
We're not that far away. I mean, people seem to say. I think we're definitely going to have it before the holidays. So I wouldn't expect, maybe the last week of November, first week of December, something like that.
Yeah. Here's one of my favorite: the digital clock widget on your home screen. I usually don't put, most of the time I can look up in the upper left corner and see the time, right? But if I wanted to add a widget, the only option was the analog clock. Isn't that correct before? But now you actually can have a digital option there. Again, it's tiny, minor tweak, but it's just neat that, it's at least it's something there. You also link to the Watch OS 10 update. What was this exactly here? Oh, yeah. About swiping to change your watch faces. Please explain a little bit more, my friend.
Yeah, for a long time, you've been able to swipe between different watch faces on your Apple Watch just by, swiping left to right. And I do it a lot because I have like the watch face that I'm looking at right now has like my circles and stuff. I'm like trying to track my circles during the day. But then sometimes I want to swipe over to like the Snoopy watch face, which is really funny. Or I might want to swipe over to something that has the time really, really big if I'm going to be outside in bright lights. And I like switching Apple Watch faces.
Sure.
And it used to be so easy, and now it's harder. Ever since the Watch OS 10, which came out a month or two ago, now you need to first push down on your screen, which just hold your finger on the screen for 2 seconds until you
get into the
feel the little click,
right?
And then you can use the digital crown, or you can swipe back and forth. And I just don't like that extra step of first having to push down.
I get you.
I would prefer to just swipe back and forth. And so I was thrilled to see that at least in the current beta version of 10.2, it's an option that I don't think it's going to be on by default. I think you have to go into settings and turn it on, but that's fine. I'll go into settings and turn it on because I preferred it the way that it used to be. And I know it's a minor thing. I'm like, why am I complaining about something so small? But again, I do change my watch faces throughout the day. And every time I do it now, it bothers me just a little bit. And, nobody likes to be bothered even for a second or two every single day, multiple times a day. So I really hope this feature comes out in 10.2.
Yeah. I remember doing that, not maybe as often as you, but now that I can't do anything. In other words, it seemed like that Apple should have swapped it out, that feature with swiping back and forth, with another feature, right? But they just killed it. Like there's nothing. Like I just like the idea that if I did want to switch back and forth, that I would have that option. Now I just accidentally kind of keep hitting widgets on here, which is not good. Okay, good. That's WatchOS 10.2, and we don't really
to watch out for.
Yeah, we don't know when that's going to happen right on there. So, I mentioned our Where You At segment, which we don't have one today. We do our In the Know segment. I think we're going to start having to have like a home automation segment, Jeff. we keep coming up with these stories, and I think it's just going to get more and more interesting. We'll think about that for our Automate My Face, maybe. For our home automation feature today, the Aqara E1 camera delivers HomeKit Secure video in a compact package. I really like the way this little gadget looks here.
Yeah, Aqara is one of the companies that they tend to be a little bit lower priced, but they're pretty good. People, I haven't tried any of them myself, but I know that people really like them, and they've got some stuff that works with HomeKit Secure Video. As a reminder, when you have a camera, whether it's external or internal, many of the companies that sell the cameras will say that they have a service that you need to pay for monthly, and they will keep your videos online so that you can go and you can view past videos. And there have been instances in the past of some of these companies. They didn't program something correctly. And so some third parties are able to view your videos, and nobody would certainly want to have a third party viewing videos from within your own house, right? That's a real privacy invasion. So one of the things I like about Apple's HomeKit Secure video system is that when your camera supports it, all of the videos they're incredibly encrypted, and yes, you can get to them online, but Apple has super duper protections on it. I trust Apple to do this correctly, and so it's a service that I can trust more to have online access. So I have it turned on for I have Eero cameras at my house, and I don't use Eero's service. They have one, I just don't pay for it. I don't use it. I just use Apple's HomeKit Secure Video, and there are some downsides too. Like my cameras technically support 2K video, but Apple Secure Video only supports 1080p. So there's some compromises to have it. But anyway, so if you're looking for a camera, whether it's an indoor camera like this one or outdoor camera, a feature you might want to have is not just HomeKit support, but also Apple's HomeKit Secure Video support. And this looks like a relatively low priced. I think it's like $60. It's a relatively low priced camera that can sort of move around, and it looks like a nice alternative. It's something that I would definitely consider if I was in the market.
Could be something for the Christmas list. I like it.
Yeah, it's $60 on Amazon. So
60. Okay, very good. It's also that time of the year, not just for Christmas, but also the App Store Awards. I got to be honest, I know we've covered this in the past, and I got to be honest, I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to it because I feel like most of the winners to me are, I take it for granted. Like, okay, well, of course, I'm trying to remember a couple of the ones in the past, but I'm like, well, that makes total sense. This year, I got a little skin in the game, I feel like, only because 2 of the 3 iPhone App of the Year finalists are probably 2 of some of my favorite apps. And I'm like, I don't know which one I would actually pick out of this. So anyway, this page is great. And also, just quickly, by the way, I remember back in the day, they used to do these App Store Awards, and I would really more focus on like local type apps, mostly like games, for example, or something that I could do like on the iPhone itself. But the 2 of these 3 apps, in my mind, I'm really relying probably more on the ability for it to connect to the internet and also GPS capabilities. So the 3 apps that are up for the iPhone App of the Year finalists are All Trails, which I've had as my pick before. Then Duolingo, which is a great app for my kids have been using that in the past when they were learning different languages. And the 3rd finalist is Flighty, which has also been one of my tips. And so All Trails is a way that I track like different trails if I'm hiking somewhere. Flighty is an absolute must-have for me when I am traveling and flying. These are both great apps, Jeff. I don't know what I would pick. I want them both to win.
And I'll tell you,
all 3 to win, really.
Duolingo too. Last year, when my wife and I traveled to Italy, I subscribed for a couple of months to Duolingo.
Oh, you did? Okay.
to learn Italian, and I didn't get very far in it. But I tell you what, it was really helpful. The Duolingo app it's a great app for learning a language, and so I knew the basics of Italian, and I could sort of work my way around menus and simple phrases simply because thanks to the Duolingo app. So because it sort of gamifies it a little bit and makes it fun to learn. So these are all fantastic apps, and these are just the App of the Year finalists. I mean, when you scroll down the page, I know there's tons of other apps, and and I'm not a big game person, so a lot of these games I don't know, but there's lots of really interesting things here. And I love the idea that Apple will actually highlight these apps so that you can learn about all these different ones that are out there that really push the system, to do its best or really do something interesting or unique. So it's a great way to discover apps, just sort of scrolling through the list and saying, I might want to check this one out.
Yeah, because all of these apps, anytime that Apple is going to pick one, it's going to be a well-regarded, well-reviewed app. I mean, they always do a very good job. I'm so torn. Like I want all 3 of these to win the App of the Year final because they're all so good. And honestly, just quickly, I don't know Duolingo as much, but All Trails and Flighty, just even over this past year, I have seen quite a number of excellent upgrades. Like both of these companies have really put a lot into investing in that. And to me, again,
they have absolutely.
To my earlier point, it's like these are well-used apps. So I think you even mentioned it in your post today, Jeff. You're like, some of these apps I have no idea about, but I want to go and try them, just so that we can be aware, like these are going to be some good apps on there. But good luck. to all of the above and hoping that all of them could win. That would be fantastic. Well, let's take a moment quickly to thank our sponsor, Lit Software. We've talked about them a couple of times over the last few episodes, and this is a company that you and I know very well simply just because of our professional career in the legal space that it just so happens we also do the professional career on the tech space. And so this is a great mix of both of these things, because Lit Software makes some of the best apps that we recommend all the time for legal professionals. If you're using an iPad mostly, but they will also work on a Mac these days as well. But if you're using an iPad, TrialPad is an excellent app for trial presentation, or frankly, any presentation. I tell people all the time, don't get hung up on the trial part of it. It is a great way to pull up a document and then zoom in or do a call out on a specific area or a page or a sentence. And then you can highlight using your iPad, and then up on the screen, people just see exactly what you highlight or what you underline, etc. But Lit Software also makes another app that you've talked to and spoken about quite a bit, Transcript Pad, which is a good way to summarize transcripts that we might get from depositions or from court proceedings. And it's a great way to organize all of these transcripts in one place and then also apply issue tags. Lit Software also,
and let me interrupt you for a second, Brett.
Absolutely.
Just last week, I'm getting ready for a trial right now, and I was talking to a whole bunch of other attorneys, and we have lots of depositions in the case, and we're like, well, what did some witness talk about X? And like, while everybody else is fumbling around, like in a second, I pulled up Transcript Pad. Instantly found, did a search across all the witnesses. This is exactly what the witness said, and they said it again down here. So useful. But anyway, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, Transcript Pad is just fantastic. Go ahead.
Because I tell people that all the time, because I'm going to guess at least some of those other folks that were in the room with you probably had paper copies of those transcripts, right? And so they were flipping back and forth. It's just annoying to do. Anyway, that's perfect. That's an exact perfect example of why these are so great. But we've done Trial Pad, Transcript Pad. Lit Software also makes Doc Review Pad, which I don't see as many people using, but it is an excellent app to be able to organize like a small-ish set of documents that you might need to pull up for exactly the reason, kind of along the lines of what you just said, Jeff. If you've got it instead of a 3-ring binder or a box of documents, that you might need to go and rumble around in, Doc Review Pad allows you just to instantly get to a specific document, so you can pull it up even for reference, but you can also then tag it, with an issue designation or something else. And then there is a fourth app that Lit Software includes in their Lit Suite, which is called Exhibits Pad. Now, that's a really very focused app that the developers created for giving an iPad to like a jury, for example, if they need to have the documents with them at the time. But it really, really works well when you need it. Those are the 4 apps currently right now that are available in the Lit Suite from Lit Software. All of those apps come for $399 a year, which may initially sound a little crazy. People always like, oh my goodness, Angry Birds is free. And I'm like, yeah, of course it is, until you start having to pay for all the things. But this is really professional grade software. And you and I can both attest to the fact, Jeff, that even over all the years that we've known Lit Software, they continue to make amazing improvements. Even as we spoke last week about now the fact that you can sync text and video in Transcript Pad. Like, that wasn't around, 8 months ago or so. And the fact that they're continuing to make these improvements is why this the subscription makes sense. What we just like to talk about quickly today is that's for an individual. If you are at a bigger company or an organization, or such as a law firm, for example, and you would like to instead get multiple individuals up and running on the Lit Software Lit Suite, there is an enterprise program that's available. We'll have the links in the show notes so you can go and get some more information. But there are some discounts available if you sign up for 2 years or 3 years at a time, so that you can put all of that into your budget and get that taken care of. There is the ability that you can take a license and apply it to another iPad. So some of the firms that I work with, Jeff, they may have 20 licenses, and they may have it assigned to certain individuals, but then they may also, somebody might leave the firm and they would need to reassign that license to another individual that brings in their iPad. And you can absolutely take care of that with the enterprise. Or you can assign it to even iPads that are maybe just like, firm-wide iPads that other people can use, that kind of a thing. Anyway, we'll link to some of the additional information in here for the enterprise option on this. But again, this is multi-year licensing with discounted pricing. There's other advantages. You get some free training that's involved with that, so that you can make sure everybody's up to speed on it. And I would just like to say, if you've heard about these apps, even us talking about them, or you've heard about them from other people that you connect with, you can just go and use a 7-day free trial for any of these apps. Just try it out. You get full access to all of this. In fact, right here on the page, here's a free trial component here. You can go and download those for either your Mac or for your iPad. Try it out. See how you can use it, see how great it is. You can ask us questions if you need to. And then if at that point, once you're convinced, you can reach out to us or even the folks at Lit Software if you wanted to talk to them about an enterprise license on there. Anything else you have to add, Jeff, on that?
I love the apps. Use them all the time.
That was pretty simple. We do want to say thank you to Lit Software for being a sponsor here. You can tell both of us, well, Jeff didn't get a chance to talk too much today, but you can tell that both of us are big fans of these apps and happy to answer any questions on that. All right, in the know. Well, since I just talked a lot, Jeff, how about you take the first slab? What is your tip for in the know today?
So if you are the sort of person who enjoys listening to podcasts, and since you're listening to this one, I hope that includes you, you know that there's a number of different podcast apps out there, but the one that I encourage people to use is called Overcast. It is fantastic.
Oh, yes.
Apple's built-in podcast app it does get better every year, but Overcast is really the best one, and you can use it for free, and you can get access to advanced features by paying a very small fee every year. There's so many things that I love about Overcast, but the one I was going to talk about today is playlists, because I suspect that you don't just listen to one podcast; you have a bunch of podcasts you listen to, and the Overcast app does a great job of allowing you to have different playlists so that to control what you want to listen to. And so, for example, I have a single playlist called New, which is the main playlist that I use. And what it does, it includes just about all episodes of all of my podcasts with a few exceptions. And I have it sorted newest to oldest because maybe if I have a podcast I listen to, I may have missed the episode that came out 2 weeks ago, but if I go listen to it right now, I don't want to listen to 2 weeks ago's episode. I want to listen to the most recent one because it's the current news. If it's like a news-oriented podcast like this one is. So I have them sorted newest to oldest, and I have all the stuff, but then I will exclude some. And then another thing you can do with the list is you can have priority podcasts. So if you know that of all the podcasts I listen to, these 2 or 3 are my favorite, they will go up to the top of the list automatically. And so the end result is every time I open the list of new, it includes, at the very top are the ones that I'm going to want to listen to first.
Right.
And then it's going to have the latest episodes of the podcast that I want. And for a lot of my podcast listening, that works great. But then there's other types of podcasts too. There are some podcasts, I call them sort of episodic podcasts, where I want to listen to them in order. Sometimes it's because it's a podcast that isn't like a time-related one. Like, I have some podcasts that just describe like movies and books and stuff like that. And they're sort of, you could listen to them in any order. I have some space podcasts I listen to that, they have the current news of space, but you can just sort of listen to them in order. And I just prefer to listen to them from oldest to newest. And so I'll have a separate list of those podcasts. Or another good example is one of the things that I love doing, if there's a show that I really, really enjoy watching, like, for example, the For All Mankind show on Apple TV Plus, which I always brag about, and I love it. There's a great podcast I listen to called NASA Vending Machine, where Jason Snell and Dan Moren talk about each episode. But that's one that I don't want, that when they have a new episode come out, I don't want it to go to the top of my list because I may not have seen the episode yet. So the last thing you want to be doing is driving around in the car, and I finish one podcast and suddenly they start spoiling the show that I haven't seen yet. And so I might put that in a separate list and have it go oldest to newest because I'm going to want to listen to that order. So I like that you can have different lists. There's also a built-in one called In Progress, which is nice because, sometimes I might start listening to a podcast and then you end up listening to a different one. And the next thing you know, you sort of forgot that you never listened to the second half of that podcast. And if it's a news-related podcast, maybe it's no longer relevant. But if it's not, it's like, oh, yeah, I do want to go back and listen to the rest of it. So this list that's called In Progress, you could just easily see, here's the ones that I did not finish listening to if I want to go back to them. And then finally, you can have a list called Queue. This is one of their built-in options. And it's, sometimes I will be reading or listening, or you learn about a specific episode of a specific podcast, and you're like, I want to listen to that one day. Maybe they interviewed an author of a book that I really enjoyed. And so I will take that episode and I'll just put it in the queue playlist. And therefore, at some point in the future, when I'm just like looking for something, I'm saying, oh yeah, this is sort of, it's like bookmarking. It's like I bookmarked it that at some point in the future, I want to listen to it. If I really enjoy it, maybe I'll go ahead and subscribe to that podcast to listen
Right.
to all of their episodes. But oftentimes, no, I just want to hear like one specific episode of just this one, specific podcast because of something that they talked about. So the ability to use the different lists is something that makes Overcast really, really effective. I love it. So, and the idea that they're smart lists and that they're automatically updating. It's just one. I mean, there's a million things I love about Overcast app, but this one feature alone makes it great. This on top of all the other features it has, just for me, makes it the app to use.
I think that your new playlist is brilliant. I guess I had turned that off. Like I only used a couple of playlists, which I'll talk about in just a minute, but that's fantastic. I love that idea about like the new playlist, because probably like you, Jeff, I've got so many podcasts that I have to scroll down to find the podcast first, and then I go into the episodes. But if I could just tap at the very top, oh, that's good. In fact, for some reason, I turned off the in progress one as well, and now I just turned it back on, because now I can jump back. Yeah, I can jump back to the ones that I use. Well, that's brilliant. And I would just say, we know from our podcast stats that a lot of you out there are probably using Overcast, which is great. So here's the little Easter egg that I found this past week in Overcast, Jeff. This I thought was absolutely brilliant, and I hadn't seen anybody post about this. So here is the situation. I have a lot of podcasts in my Overcast app on my iPhone, but when I go out walking or running or hiking, I don't like to take my iPhone unless I have to, but I have my Apple Watch, right? So what I do is I install the Overcast app on my Apple Watch. This is going to take a little bit of explanation, but go with me here. I have the Overcast app on my watch, and I can tell the Overcast app on my Apple Watch that I want to synchronize or download the episodes from this particular playlist in my iPhone. So I right now I've got an educational podcast that I've got several episodes that I wanted to listen to when I was out walking, right? So I created a playlist, just like what we talked about, on my iPhone on the Overcast app, and then I went to my Apple Watch in the Overcast app on the Apple Watch, and I said, download the episodes from this playlist. And so what happens is the Apple Watch and the iPhone synchronize, right? So there's a little button that you can tap to synchronize the Overcast app on the watch and your iPhone. And it does a good job most of the time of downloading those episodes in that playlist. But there was a time this past week when I needed to go quickly. I didn't have time for everything to synchronize up. So I went into my Apple Watch on my Overcast app, and I said, I want this episode to download now. And when I did that, there was an option there that allows me to download when it was charging, or to download when right now, but I have to have the Apple Watch face open at all times. Here's a little video. I found one video online that walks through this, because when I said I want to watch it, I want to keep the screen on, there is a little hidden game inside the app. So here's this gentleman going in. There's a little synchronization button in this video, and I know people listening can't see it. But now when he goes into this list, there's the download button. He taps the download button. You can download it when charging or keep the screen on. And if you tap keep the screen on, meaning that you don't want the screen to go off, so you have to keep the screen on. Mm-hmm. And as it's on, Marco Arment put a little tiny game on your Apple Watch. Do you see it?
It's funny, like, yeah.
It looks like the little Pong game, but the little bricks that you're hitting, or I don't know, I forget what the name. I call it Pong, but it was something else, right? Brick Smasher or something like that.
This is Pong, yeah. This Pong.
So you have to use the digital crown to move the little slider at the bottom to hit the little ball that goes up, and he's got a cute little thing of all of the little icons of the podcast that you have downloaded on there.
That's very clever. I just
thought this was absolutely brilliant.
You have to keep the screen. You have to keep the Apple Watch on anyway for it to continue doing the
correct
download. And this gives you something to do to keep your screen on. I have Brett. I had never heard of this before. When you put this in the show notes today, I'm like, what are you talking about? I have never seen this, but this is very, very clever. And I agree with you on the utility, by the way. It's I also, like you, will sometimes like to download a podcast directly to my Apple Watch because I'm just listening to it directly from there.
Right.
But this is very clever that he came up with this. And see, this just shows you the people, when you think about things like that, it shows that you have an app developer that is really, really thinking about the features of their app. That's one of the reasons I love Overcast so much.
So thank you to
very
Chris
funny, very funny.
Jabet, who posted this on Mastodon, about a year ago or so. And I agree. He calls this hecking delightful. And I absolutely agree. It was just such a fun, like I think I got out walking late, Jeff, because I sat there playing this silly game because I'm just like, I had no idea something like that was in. But thank you, Marco, who is the developer of Overcast, by the way. It's almost like that's a pick. He should get an Apple App Store award if he hasn't already. I think it should. All right. Well, we want to quickly thank again our sponsor for today, Lit Software. If you have any more questions, you can go to litsoftware.com or certainly reach out to one of us. We are more than happy to talk about it. Jeff has multiple posts on iPhone JD where you can go and learn a little bit more about any of these apps as we've talked about. Good stuff today. Thanks, Jeff, as always, and we'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, Brett. And for all of our listeners in the United States, have a great Thanksgiving next week. Bye-bye.